Hello, welcome to the Living in Liberty YouTube channel. My name is Elizabeth Echeverria. I'm the founder of Living in Liberty, a nonprofit in Pittsburgh that helps women transition out of a life of sex trafficking. And today we're going to talk about sex trafficked women and why we don't like to use the term victim to refer to our women on a long-term basis. While it's important to acknowledge the fact that they were victims of sex trafficking, we want to empower and encourage them to take on a new identity. And so if we use the term victim for the long-term basis, they can adopt a victim mindset and take this on as their identity. And we want to avoid that. We want to encourage them to take on, a different identity. One of the terms that we like to use is survivor, because in the life, it took a lot of strength and fortitude for them to survive on a daily basis. So they are survivors of sex trafficking. And so this is a more empowering identity. We also like to, call them strong, and overcomers are another term. So these terms are terms that we like to refer to our women. It's important that we don't call them victims long term, because it can really create this victim mindset, which doesn't hold them accountable and doesn't make them responsible for their lives in the long term. So we don't want them to take on this victim mindset. Working to use these new terms like overcomer, survivor, strong, capable, helps them to build the self-confidence that they need to have outside of the life of being trafficked, and helps them move forward. Let me give you an example. An example of maybe if you took a test and you failed that test, and maybe you even took it several times and you failed each time you took it. And so I called you a failure, and you started to take on that identity because it had happened several times, and now people were calling you a failure. Well, no, you really aren't a failure. Did you fail a test? Maybe once, twice, 3 times, and so you failed. But does that mean you are a failure? No. We don't want you to take on that identity, just as we wouldn't want our women to take on the identity of victims. We need to change that mindset, that thinking long term, because just one time in their life where they were a victim of sex trafficking does not make them a victim for their life. They are so much more than the sum of what happened to them while they were being trafficked. And so words have power, and we want to empower our women by calling them by terms and giving them identities that strengthen and build their self-confidence, such as terms like survivor, overcomer, strong, capable. These are all important terms or names that we like to call our women, because they are. And they're moving forward outside of a life of trafficking. Because with that victim mindset comes no accountability or responsibility for the things that happen to them. And we want them moving forward to develop healthy coping skills. Having a victim mindset is an unhealthy coping skill, because there's some advantages that come with a victim mindset. If they act the victim, there is no accountability for their what happens to them. They don't control what happens to them. Things just happen to them, and they're not responsible because it's not their fault. And while maybe that may have been true for things that happened to them in the life, they can make decisions that can impact their future going forward. Also, by taking on this victim mindset, there can be secondary gains that they get from it, benefits that they get from it. It also feeds something in them to get acknowledged and receive that. And we need to acknowledge that they were victims and, support them in that. But we don't want them taking on a victim mindset. Another thing, it could satisfy an unconscious need, because of the trauma and the things that happened to them. They, want people to acknowledge that. And it's important to acknowledge that. But we don't want them taking on that mindset long term. It also can keep them from avoiding risk going forward. And life, there are always going to be risks. And if we want the rewards of things, then we often have to take the risk to get the reward. So we want to encourage them to be self-confident, to be viewed as survivors, as strong, as capable, and overcomers. And this is why we think it's important not to refer to them as victims long term, but to give them new identities and strengthen those identities and not take on a victim mindset. I hope you learned something today. My name's Elizabeth Echeverria, and I thank you for joining me today. If you could like, subscribe, and share this video and the Living in Liberty YouTube channel, I look forward to connecting with you next week. Have a great week. Bye-bye.